Hey, John, we are live and you may begin whenever you're ready.
I'll give you a countdown of 3, 2, 1. Good evening. This is a special meeting of the Board of Directors of Reston Association to conduct a public hearing on a pending referendum to repeal sections of the Reston Association deed. This is the first of two public hearings regarding a referendum to repeal portions of the Reston deed that relates solely to 6 clusters out of our 24,000 homes. It relates to an organization called RELAC. RELAC is a centralized cooling system regulated by the State Corporation Commission as a public utility that has been serving homes surrounding Lake Anne for almost 60 years. Reston Association, to be clear, does not own, control, or regulate RELAC. Pursuant to the Reston deed, the 325 homes in these 6 clusters may not use air conditioning independent of the RELAC system unless a member of the household is medically excused. In such a case, Reston Association, under the Americans with Disability Act, is compelled to grant an exception. It is my understanding that 27 such exemptions are in place out of the 600 residences currently using RELAC. In December of last year, users of the RELAC system were notified that RELAC intended not to operate the system in 2024. Mr. Waddell's notice was not sent to Reston Association. Rather, the board learned of this statement from our members. This is a terrible situation. Our members who have relied on RELAC have been placed in an impossible predicament. We have reached out to Supervisor Alcorn, who I understand is going to join us tonight, and to Board Chairman McKay, and to officers of Dominion Energy to solicit their help in dealing with the problems that are faced by our members. Upon investigation of the facts and staff talking to various parties to discover how the board could help, the board took the action to authorize the holding of a referendum to remove that section of the RA deed prohibiting those cluster homes from using any air conditioning system independent of the RELAC system. Since then, staff and board have received questions regarding next steps. The board understands that there is a significant community concern regarding the future of RELAC. The board has taken the steps available to it to enable the clusters that are using RELAC to have a choice to either continue with RELAC or to proceed to provide air conditioning to themselves and their members individually. I believe all of our members of the board are present and participating, or at least the majority of them are here. We also have with us our CEO, Matt Cummins, our Chief Operating Officer, Peter Lusk, and the head of our Covenants Division, Kim Adams. And I'll turn over to Mr. Lusk now for, if that's all right, Mr. Cummins, for some opening remarks. Peter?
Thanks, John, and good evening, everyone. I recognize lots of names here on the screen from people I've spoken to over the last few months. It's been great getting to know people here in the community, as I've mentioned in a few meetings and phone calls. This is month number 6 for me, so diving into the RELAC situation and learning about RELAC has been difficult and sometimes trying, but meeting lots of people in the process has been gratifying for me. I think from an RA perspective, we've had a great opportunity to start to share information and get more information out to members once the situation had kind of came to light here in December. And I think we continue to do so. So again, it's great to be here tonight. We're here to answer some questions. And if we need to follow up following the meeting, we're happy to do that. But again, it's been great to meet most of you and looking forward to kicking this off tonight.
Mr. Adams.
Hi, I'm Cam Adams, the Director of Covenants Administration here at Reston Association. And like Peter, I recognize several names in the audience tonight. And I first want to say I appreciate each of you being here tonight. This is clearly an important topic. It affects a lot of people. And we are here to help support RA members as much as we can. The Covenants Department is very interested in providing support as much as possible as you navigate potentially the design review board process with submitting applications and or going through the Covenants Committee process to receive a medical exemption for those of you that are available and eligible for that type of exemption. So very glad to be here tonight. If you do have any questions, I will put my email in the chat. I'm available for any questions that we can answer after this evening if it's not answered tonight.
We're honored to be joined this evening by Supervisor Walter Alcorn, who has graced us and is prepared to answer questions directed at the county to the extent that he can, understanding that not all of the answers that the county may have are available to any of us yet. Supervisor Alcorn, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me, John. Appreciate it.
So with that, let me ask the board for a motion to adopt the agenda as proposed.
So moved.
Director Grewich moves the adoption of the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vice President Juszczak. Any debate? All those in favor will say aye.
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 That is unanimous of all those present and voting. So I hereby open the public hearing related to the possible revocation of rest and deed section Roman 6(2), parent B, close parent, parent 15, close parent, which reads, air conditioning units in any residential cluster in which central air conditioning service is available to the lot line, no individual air conditioning units of any type shall be permitted. This covenant may only be amended or revoked by at least a 2/3 vote of the category A members of all residential clusters on the service. Tonight, we're not intending for there to be a dialogue, but so much as an opportunity for those resident associate members who wish to advise the board of directors as to their opinion of the proposed referendum question to do so. If there are direct answers to questions, staff is on hand to provide those answers. The staff can also follow up after the meeting in writing. Some ground rules. Comments are reserved for resident association members, and we will give preference to those members who live in those 6 clusters. When called on to speak, members are to state their full name and the RA property address. Individual members representing their own interests or opinion are allowed to speak for 3 minutes. If representing a homeowners group or cluster or another committee or organization, they were allowed 5 minutes to speak. Our board liaison, Brittany Copeland, will be timing us. And when you get to the end of your time, you will hear a bell ring. Brittany, hit the bell. Okay, you'll hear a bell, such as you used to hear at the delicatessen. When that bell sounds, your time is up, and I'll ask you to wrap up what you're having to say to all of us. So let's proceed with whoever has their hand up first. I see Leslie Meads has her hand up. Ms. Meads, please go ahead. You have, unless you're representing a cluster, you'll have 3 minutes.
It's my
Hello, yeah, hold on.
It's my husband and I, Andrew Fregley, Leslie Meads. We're at 1696 Chimney House Road, the WPCA cluster. And Andy's going to start very quickly with a
Sure,
statement.
it takes 2 minutes. This comment covers why I believe Reston Association currently has no basis for enforcing the covenant requiring use of central air conditioning in the residential units formerly served by RELAC. First, please note the applicable definition of, quote, available, unquote, found in the online version of Webster's Dictionary is, quote, present or ready for immediate use, unquote. Second, the covenant states air conditioning units in any residential cluster in which air conditioning service is, quote, I'm repeating, available to the lot line, no individual air conditioning of any type shall be permitted. Note the covenant is only applicable if central air conditioning is available at the lot line. Third, central air conditioning is not currently available to the residential clusters formerly served by RELAC based on this sentence in the email Mark Waddle of RELAC sent on December 11, 2023. We, the owners of RELAC, regrettably and with great difficulty, have to announce that the 2023 cooling season will be the last year that RELAC provides chilled water to our customers, unquote. RA's stated position that they will, quote, enforce the covenant, unquote, because, quote, RELAC LLC remains in good standing, unquote, and that there is, quote, potential of the cooperative, unquote, does not seem valid because central air conditioning is not currently present or ready or for immediate use. Given my statements, I believe a court order could be obtained which would prevent RA from enforcing the covenant. I also believe it is unconscionable for RA to state that they will enforce the covenant in face of questionable legality, potential legal liabilities, and the challenges that a yet-to-be-formed co-op must meet to provide central air conditioning in time for the 2024 cooling season. Also note that I hope the co-op succeeds and find the efforts of those seeking to establish it admirable. That's all I have to say.
Ms. Means, did you have something in 35 minutes left? 36?
Just very quickly, most of my questions have been answered. I do have one question about the design review board issue. They said it takes 60 days, say the covenant is revoked, they have as much as 60 days to approve a request. Is there any way to expedite that or accelerate it to like 30 days? Because otherwise we're getting right into the cooling season when people are given permission to install individual air conditioning units.
Mr. Adams, can you address that question?
Sure. So the deed actually establishes the 60-day time frame in reviewing all applications.
Yes.
Right now, there are 6 affected clusters with this RELAC situation, and 2 clusters actually have an established DRB-approved cluster standard. That would be Washington Plaza Cluster Association and Waterview Cluster Association. So the time frame for any a process of reviewing an application would be a little bit shorter because there is an established cluster standard. For those clusters that don't have a cluster standard, there is going to be a time frame, and it is much lesser than the 60 days that was quoted in the deed. We're averaging about 2 to 4 weeks if there is no cluster standard, or 3 to 5 business days if there is a cluster standard to review an application, as long as it adheres to the cluster standard established.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
I see Reverend Daniel Velez has his hand up. Reverend, you have 3 minutes.
Go. Hello, this is Daniel Velez and Parker Gallagher. We are residents of Vantage Hill and apartment 11C. Parker has some comments to share.
Good evening, Mr. President, officers, members of the Resident Association, Supervisor Alcorn, and the hardworking staff. We are Parker Gallagher and Daniel Velez of 11625 Vantage Hill Road in Reston. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight, which Daniel and I are doing as residents of Vantage Hill. Thank you for your interest in helping those of us facing the loss of RELAC and an uncertain future without air conditioning this coming summer. I also thank you for your patience with the emotion that comes out of this uncertainty and fear. Vantage Hill has 152 Reston Association dues-paying members who also pay for RELAC. According to recently discussed numbers, that RELAC has 600 users, which means that Vantage Hill is conceivably 25% of the RELAC user base. We learned at a recent Reston Association board meeting that Vantage Hill is not required to use RELAC, which was news to us, given the comments made during the design review board meetings where there was much discussion about this topic with our developer. We also heard at that recent Reston Association board meeting that council commented that Reston Association's position is that the new development be required to use RELAC. I do not speak for the board, Vantage Hill board, but as a community member who will suffer from the consequences, as part of your deliberations on the referendum, please consider exempting the new development from RELAC. Vantage Hill stands to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars if the new development is mandated to be tied to a failing system that doesn't work effectively because we are so far up the hill from the lake. Please refer to the comments from a Governor Square resident at the recent board meeting. Those hundreds of thousands of dollars can be used to upgrade our aging infrastructure, which now urgently includes an entire revamp of our 60 amp electrical service, serving each stack of up to 7 units. Those hundreds of thousands of dollars are not going to line the pockets of a developer. Those hundreds of thousands of dollars are going to benefit your neighbors, residents of Reston. In support of that financial number, please consider that if you were buying a brand new townhouse in Reston, but were told your air conditioning comes from a 60-year-old system that ceased operations in December of 2023, and that many of your immediate Vantage Hill neighbors can have inside temperatures at summer's peak that can exceed 80 degrees, even with RELAC on full blast 24/7, as a buyer, how much of a haircut would you want in compensation that your brand new home faces another RELAC failure, assuming that RELAC resumes this spring? Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. The next name I have is what's it, Toya? If you can give us your name and address, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Wendy Quay. I'm at 1739 Wainwright Drive. After 4 years of deliberation, the revised Reston Comprehensive Plan was approved only a few months ago. In it, there are 5 key positions and advocacy points. One of them is equity. How is it equitable that half of the people, approximately 300 people that are on the RELAC system, won't have a say in this upcoming referendum? I realize that they weren't included in the original deed, but if Reston does in fact advocate for equity as it says it does, someone would have figured out a way for them to be able to have their voices heard and their votes counted. A second key position outlined in its new comprehensive plan is environment. Before pushing for this referendum, did RA consider the environmental impact of the installation of 600 individual air conditioning units in approximately 1/4 square miles? Not only that, did they consider the environmental impact the noise pollution has? In fact, there are numerous studies demonstrating that noise pollution has an adverse effect on biodiversity. In addition, there are significant health implications associated with noise pollution. Instead of quickly pushing through this referendum, could RA have considered 1 summer's worth of supplemental support for a system that, by the way, is still working? This would have bought time for us to consider the potential impact on our environment as well as the impact on our community. We forget that many of our neighbors are on fixed incomes or are just barely getting by. They don't have $12,000 to install an air conditioning unit. It was only a few years ago that the elementary school was eligible for supplemental funding due to the number of low-income families. If you take the home values of all the homes on RELAC and you sorted them from lowest to highest, you would see that the ones that have no say in this upcoming referendum are the ones on the lower end, and the ones that have a say are the ones on the higher end. What is equitable about that? I don't see how you can say your hands are tied, because when you drew this referendum up, you knew that those homes, those 300 homes on RELAC were on RELAC, and you could have figured out a way to include those folks. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anybody else who would like to be heard? Is there anybody else who would like to be heard? Mr. Crow, I see you have your hand up. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please go
Hello?
ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I just wanted to say the introductory remarks, at the conclusion of those introductory remarks, it sounded like what you were saying was that if the referendum passes, it's a choice that those affected clusters are making whether to be on RELAC or not. And that's not what it is. It would allow anybody who wants to not be on RELAC to install an individual unit, but anybody who wants to stay on RELAC can, even if the referendum passes. That's getting blurred in a lot of conversations about that. And your own introductory remarks made it seem like if the referendum passes, nobody can have RELAC, and that's just false.
Well,
And then the other point is,
I'm sorry. I was going to apologize if that's what you heard. I meant to say exactly what you just said, which is if the referendum passes, the clusters will be free to stay with RELAC, and they will also be free to have individual
Right, each individual homeowner.
Right.
Yeah, each individual homeowner will be able to make that choice for themselves. And then my only other thing is in response to whether or not, you know, people who are not subject to the section 15 of the covenants be able to vote on it. Since they're not subject to it, it wouldn't make sense for them to be able to vote on it. Only those people who are required to, only those people who are subject to the covenant are, it makes sense that only those people who are subject to section 15 are the ones voting on whether to keep it. And the people who aren't subject to it, I think it makes sense that they're not able to vote on it. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Crow. I see Lee DeCola. Mr. DeCola, you unmute yourself. You'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, my name is Lee DeCola. I live at 1626 Wainwright Drive in Colson Cluster. I'm on the RELAC system, and I'm very, I'm hopeful, very strongly hopeful that it will survive this crisis. But I'm just offering my services. I think one of the things that's burdening us all as a scientist, I'm very disappointed in the numbers of facts that are being thrown around, the numbers of people on the system, off the system, how much it's going to cost, how much water it delivers, what the boats are going to mean. So I'm offering my services as a scientist, as a retired geographer, to RA, as well as anyone else who, in the efforts to put together some facts so that we can actually see what the numbers look like. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Ani, you have your hand raised. If you can give us your name and address, you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Anthony Ani. Thank you very much for giving me the time to speak. I live at 1855 Wainwright Drive. I'm a 40-year resident. I think that we're all in a difficult position because there's a lot of conflicting information that's come out. It's confusing. And for that reason, I'd really like people to consider not having the referendum so soon. In fact, on Saturday, Simon McCown sent out a message that said the RELAC is still operational, and that it's a system that will be available, I think he said, by April 1st. So I'm a little confused as to what we're really trying to achieve when the system is, in fact, still in place. I really understand that the comments from people who said they're not represented to vote. I think that is an unfortunate situation, which ought to be considered as well if there's going to be a referendum. And I think that it would behoove all of us to get the best information and not be forced into an immediate decision that may or may not be necessary. As I said, the system appears to still be operational unless I'm hearing something that's wrong. That's what I'm being told. I do understand that we will have a choice once the referendum goes through. My concern is there'll be a referendum. People will be allowed to leave the system. You will then reduce the number of users tremendously, and that will cause a problem for those who are still, for whatever reason, have to remain on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? I see Michael has his hand raised. Michael, if you can unmute yourself, you will have 3 minutes.
Very good. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Lusk for his involvement in several meetings, several community meetings recently. That was very helpful to have him there. I also want to clarify with the board one specific issue, and that is related to the vote. Let's assume, for the sake of simple numbers, that there are 300 people, 300 Class A members, voters, who will be involved. Is it true that to revoke the referendum, a vote of 200 or 201 will be required to revoke it? not a 2/3 majority of those voting, but a 2/3 majority of all those who could possibly vote.
I'm going to ask council to go over the numbers with me, but as I understand them, council, correct me, there are 325 potential voters, and 2/3, we have a quorum requirement, and if 2/3 of those voting vote to repeal the covenant, the covenant would be repealed.
What's the quorum requirement then?
Council?
John, generally, I don't like to give out legal advice to the public.
I understand that. But, okay. It would be helpful, though, for us to know what the quorum requirement is.
Absolutely.
Give me a second to pull it up.
I can't hear you.
I said, please give me a second, I'll pull up the deed.
Yeah, it essentially amounts to, is it 2/3 of those who vote or 2/3 of those who could possibly vote?
While we're looking for that answer for you, is there anything else, sir?
No, I think that's it. And by the way, I didn't give my full name and address. It's Michael Post, 11557 Maple Ridge Road. Sorry.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Is there anyone else who wants to be heard?
I assume Mr. Champ will come back with that number soon.
I'm expecting that at least he would communicate that to the board. Sheriff Lusco?
I'm placing the quote in chat. It is 2/3 of all members in the clusters that are affected. Okay. Not a voting.
Okay, so that 2/3 of that, if my math is right, we'd need 217 affirmative votes to repeal the covenant. Cheryl Lusco, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Cheryl Lesko. I live at 1831 Wainwright Drive in Governor Square. I just wanted to repeat some information that I sent to the board of directors this afternoon. And basically, after receiving the email from Simon McCowan this past weekend, I'd like Reston Association Board to reconsider its position on the RELAC referendum and stop the RELAC referendum process because RELAC intends to continue to operate. If RELAC continues to operate, then there is no question if the chilled air service will continue, and thus a referendum is not necessary. Tonight is the first night of the referendum hearing, and this would be a perfect opportunity to stop the process. Again, if RELAC is still operational, then it should go on without any type of referendum to stop it. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. I see that Leslie Meads has her hand up, but Ms. Meads, you've already had an opportunity to speak. I want to make sure that everybody else has had an opportunity to speak before going back to second round comments. So I see your hand up, but if we can wait to make sure everybody else has a first round comment, that I would appreciate it. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? Anyone else? Well, Ms. Meads, you go right ahead.
Okay.
Just a comment about the vote question that was just asked. I found a communication on, that was actually on the co-op, the RELAC co-op website. It was from Erwin Flashman on the board of directors regarding the vote. And it says that 2/3 of category A members are required in the referendum and in which at least 30% of such members participate. So it was my understanding that the 2/3 is counted from the people who vote, not the total number of
Can you quote them
households.
the deed
Yeah, he says, he even quotes the deed, deed article 512B15 and B5111.2A. In this communication from Erwin, I have it in my hand.
So we'd really like to have the lawyer look at those sections and then reiterate whether or not this is correct or not.
Just so we're all on the same page about the vote.
We'll try and make that happen. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Anybody else? Mr. Velez? Oh, Reverend Velez, I'm sorry.
Thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to offer up, and COO Lusk was at the meeting with the first meeting that Simon and his team had. He was very, very clear that the restart of RELAC is completely and solely a function of if they can raise all the money. And he quoted a figure of $2,000 per user or something like that in order to raise the money. Now, that information may have changed because I haven't been tracking it as closely as I had, but it sounded from what he said when I asked him the question as a follow-up that RELAC will not restart unless they can get all the funds in hand. If that's the case, and I'm not saying that it is, but if that is the case, someone earlier tonight made a comment about, is there potentially some way that Reston Association could step in and help us to bridge the year that it's going to take for us to do something about replacing RELAC if it fails? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really don't want to get into a situation where we have members debating each other, but in the interest of fairness, Ms. Lusko, you had your hand up again.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted, we had Lee on the phone, on the participants, and Lee is part of the steering committee. He might be able to provide a little bit of insight as to where the co-op is. But again, if we refer back to the email that just came out from Simon McCowan, he says, do not fret. It doesn't matter how long the co-op will take to get up off the ground. So it becomes more a let's sell RELAC. So that's a mute issue. That'll happen or not happen. It doesn't matter to us. But they said in there, RELAC is available to be running. So if Lee is still on the phone, maybe Lee can give us some insight. Thank you.
Certainly. Anyone else who wants to be heard? Anyone else wishing to be heard? Mr. Adams, before we wrap up, it seemed to me that you were saying earlier that you were working with the clusters to try to, Ms. Blumenthal, I'll be with you in a second, trying to smooth the process so that we can accelerate the review as quickly as possible. In order for that to happen, you're going to need the cooperation of what, 4 different clusters in order to get a cluster guideline adopted?
Yes. So we've had an early meeting with each of the cluster presidents that are affected by the RELAC announcement. And Covenant staff believes the best way to quickly resolve going through the design review work process since submitting a DRB application is that each cluster establish a cluster standard related to the HVAC systems. So 4 of the 6 do not have an established cluster standard. We have had DRB members team up with each cluster to help facilitate the conversation and some recommendations as they go through establishing a cluster standard. I believe Cheryl has been connected in Governor Square with one of our DRB members. Hickory Cluster has as well, so has Colson and Wainwright. And so they are actively working on submitting applications through the design review board process to establish the cluster standard, which should in effect reduce the time for members individually to go through the design review work process with their applications and get a quicker expedited review for their applications if there is an established cluster standard.
And Mac and I met with Supervisor Alcorn on Friday and reviewed what kind of turnaround we can expect with permitting for individual heat pumps or HVA systems. Supervisor Alcorn, you want to share what you shared with Mac and I on Friday?
Yeah, for sure, John. For townhouse residents who would be looking to install generally a condenser, heat pump, whatever the technology might be. Typically, that's a same day turnaround in terms of the county permit, assuming that you're working with a contractor that uses the process. Frankly, it's somebody who's working within the system. So the county permitting issues should not, if folks end up going down that path, that should not be an impediment. And that's just for the townhouse. It's not for Heron House or Vantage Hill, where it would be a different, potentially a different permitting situation, different types of AC units.
Terrific. Thank you, Supervisor Alcorn. You see Shannon Blumenthal has her hand up. Ms. Blumenthal, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, yes. Thank you. So I am in Hickory Cluster, Shannon Blumenthal. 2 short questions. One, if the referendum passes, would I be able to remove the RELAC system from my home? So like terminate the RELAC connections for the pipes into my home if I would no longer be using RELAC. And then the second is, I'm working with my HOA on, I would have to use an easement area to install my own air conditioner. And so I'm working with the HOA for what that process would be, but would there be an added process with the Reston Association to be able to use easement to install my outdoor air conditioning unit? Because I'm looking at, between, the option for using the easement is about $60,000 to $75,000 less than not using the easement. So that's why I'm pursuing that direction. Thank you.
Mr. Adams, can we help out Ms. Blumenthal?
I would have to individually respond. My email is in the chat. I don't know the circumstances around what specific easement you're trying to access. Generally speaking, things installed in easements are not a recommendation that I would make, but that's clearly, as an individual member, something that you would need to decide. But we can kind of navigate how that would work in terms of requirements versus what the design review board would deem as something that's reasonably able to be reviewed by them.
I see What's It To You has their hand up again.
Sorry, I can't figure out how to change it. I'm Wendy. I have a question about the DRB guidelines. I was wondering if you would end up having member comment for specifically the decibel limits. Thank you for changing my name. Specifically the decibel limits. Will we be able to contribute to the new guidelines for our community? At least to comment on it. That's all.
Mr. Adams?
Sure. So Reston Association would not limit the decibel level. Actually, Fairfax County already does that at 72 dBAs. So most cluster standards that we're seeing in terms of decibel levels have that maximum at 72 to match what Fairfax County has. Some clusters may want to be more restrictive, but ultimately that will be a determination that the design review board will need to make if a cluster is requesting such maximum below what Fairfax County permits. I will also share that there are some clusters that have already established a standard that does add for additional screening or does add for sound mitigation, sound damping materials to be installed on top of the unit to ensure that the decibel level is reduced as much as possible.
Thank you. Hopefully that answers Wendy's question. Is there anybody else who wishes to be heard? I will say that 7:09, we're supposed to start a board governance committee meeting at 7 o'clock. We're running a little late, and I apologize to the chair, Vice President Juszak, and the other members of the Is there anybody else wishing to be heard this evening during this public hearing? If there are no further, oh, here we go. Cheryl, let's go.
Hi there. Thank you again. I was just curious, since we have Supervisor Alcorn on the phone, if there was any additional information he'd like to share on what his office is doing regarding RELAC. I know that they've been working with Dominion to get an update on whether or not the electrical grid in this area can work. So just curious if there's other information he can share about what his office might be working on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl, for the question. We are expecting Dominion to get us something in writing this week. They have provided verbally somewhat of a response. I'm hoping we're going to get something in writing that's a little more definitive. Their basic answer is that there's not a problem with enough electricity in the grid, but there may be a need, depending upon the type of technologies that would be implemented for new AC systems. There might be a need for new transformers in some areas, but they are holding back saying that definitively or not until basically the analysis would be done. So again, hopefully we'll see something more definitive there. There had been some discussion of a state SAVE Act as being useful. We were one of the folks that basically confirmed that that is not an option for RELAC. There is not a pathway through at least the SAVE Act for RELAC. We are putting together a list of ways that the county might be able to help depending upon the path that the community here goes. If it's a matter of individuals needing assistance for their own units, there are some programs that might be able to provide some help. One of the challenges with direct help for RELAC is really unique, and there really are no, at least county level programs designed to service a system like that. But we're continuing to look, and we are also talking with a nonprofit organization that it specializes in weatherization and HVAC support for various communities. Going to be meeting with them later this week to try to get them to pick their brain a little bit and see if there might be, what might be relevant, because they're really the experts on, particularly the federal grant funding for at least HVAC systems. So in a nutshell, that's probably it. And we're running down ideas all the time, hearing from folks. We're in touch with Simon and pretty much anybody who's trying to get answers. We're trying to be as helpful as we can.
Supervisor Alcorn, just for a little bit of clarification, as I understand it, the need for the transformers is really focused on the LARCA Vantage Hill situation, and not so much for individual homeowners with adding a heat pump.
Yeah, I'm waiting to hear that for sure back from Dominion, but I think you're probably right, John. But yeah, let's see what they come back with, but that's probably going to be the case. There was also a question that we tried to get Dominion to answer. They really couldn't, which is, would there need to be improvements inside some of the townhouse units in terms of the electrical system? And they basically kind of threw their hands up and said, yeah, we can't answer that. We don't know. So that is on a case-by-case basis. There may be those situations as well.
And the contractor who might put in such a system would be the best source of that information as to whether or not there'd need to be an upgrade on the electrical system for an individual.
That's right. Exactly. Yep.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak? Michael, you have your hand up.
Thanks. Just really quickly, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, please.
Just very quickly, could you definitively publish, because I heard two kind of conflicting explanations, one from your legal counsel and one from another person who commented on the vote situation. Quorum versus total possible voters versus those that filled up the quorum, et cetera, et cetera. We need something definitive if possible. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to do that during this meeting. We'll post something probably on the website after the board has an opportunity to discuss the matter with council.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate your flexibility. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? Well, let me say thank you to all of those who came out to speak tonight. We really appreciate your input and you taking the time to share your thoughts. I want everyone who's participated tonight to know that the board takes the situation extraordinarily seriously. Nobody wants anyone to suffer nobody on the board or on the staff of Resident Association, and I'm sure I can speak for Supervisor Alcorn on this, wants anyone this summer to suffer any adverse health effects from the situation that Mr. Wardell and his organization has put us all in. It's regrettable that we didn't have more advance notice to give us time to act with more information. But that's the situation we're faced with. The board has acted as rapidly as we can. I thank Mr. Adams and Mr. Lusk for their diligence and trying to come up for answers for the membership. And I thank all of you for coming out tonight and sharing your thoughts with us. If there are no further members who wish to speak, I hereby declare this public hearing closed. I thank you all for participating and wish you a good night. And with that, Vice President Juszczyk, you're on with your BGC meeting. Thank you all.